From Troy Public Radio, this is TPR Podcast Presents, programming made where you live. I'm Austin Toy. Every week, we bring you selections from one of Troy Public Radio's 17 locally produced podcasts. Peanuts are not typically thought of as a Thanksgiving food, but they are a food to be thankful for, especially in Dothan, Alabama, where they hold the National Peanut Festival. Given the prominence of the festival, you might think that Dothan had a lifelong relationship with the peanut, but it turns out the city's first love was cotton. And if it wasn't for a pesky little insect, that might still be true today. On this selection from the It Came From the Archives podcast, the story of Dothan's first peanut festival, held in 1938.
This area of the country was overrun with cotton-eating boll weevils. They began to come into the United States, into Texas in 1910, and they marched through the cotton lands to the east, arriving here by about the beginning of the First World War, and then being a real menace by 1920.
And this was extremely economically disruptive.
Extremely economically disruptive. And unless you're a farmer, you don't realize that you can't just shift crops. There has to be an entire infrastructure set up to support a shift in crops. And what historian Catherine Braund tells us from an article in Agricultural History, the rise of Billy Boll Weevil, she tells us that bankers and industrialists, commercial people from this area, before the farmers had to stop planting cotton and diversify their crops, these people created a system for paying for crops. You know, we always talk about everybody planting cotton right up to the edge of their house, particularly if they're sharecroppers. Well, it was because the only crop you could get money for was cotton. But if the cotton crop's going away, what are you going to get money for? These people said, we can do hogs, we can do peanuts to feed hogs, and there are 2 or 3 other crops, sweet potatoes that we could plant, and so we will loan money on those. We will set up systems to process these materials instead of cotton. They got ahead of it. And so this area did not suffer nearly as badly as other areas did, because the people that provided money decided they provide money for diversified crops. So what did Dothan do? Farmers in this area planted peanuts. Peanuts were not a human food at that point. The old song that you may have studied, well, if you're my age, you did study, in grammar school, you learned to sing in grammar school, Eating Goober Peas, which was, everybody always said that was an old Confederate song. It was because these guys were starving, and they ate whatever food they could get, and they were reduced to eating peanuts, which was hog food. We also found out you can't finish hogs on peanuts. It makes the meat terrible, but you can start them on peanuts. Anyway, so Dothan becomes the peanut capital of the world. It probably isn't, but we like to say that. It began in 1920. For 18 years, people in the area planted peanuts, and they didn't completely get rid of cotton, but they substituted peanuts for very much of the income that they would have gotten from cotton, and helped to diversify agriculture, and by getting rid of some of their cotton acreage, began to eradicate or at least control the spread of boll weevils. Boll weevils, like any other plague. You know, the fewer cases you have of it, the less likely it is to spread and to change and to become even worse. So these guys reduced that by planting peanuts in particular, and using them to feed hogs with. And it was fairly simple. All you did was turn hogs out in the peanut field, and they'd take care of themselves. You know how hogs are.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So anyway, by 1938, the area decided to celebrate I'm not sure exactly who started this, but this was put together, and it's not an unusual thing to create or to have a body that is comfortable creating a large festival. I think they thought it might just be one-off. So in 1938, that festival was 3 days long, and it culminated on Armistice Day, November 11th, what we call Veterans Day now. They had a beauty pageant, which we still have. They had a community banquet, which we don't have. They had a 34 float parade, and we still have that National Peanut Festival parade. They had a grand ball. The big deal in 38 was the keynote address by Dr. George Washington Carver of Tuskegee Institute.
Wow. I saw this and I was like, that's remarkable. This is a huge piece of history. How did that come about, if we know that? And what was the reaction at that time in the segregated South?
George Washington Carver was well loved in this area. He wasn't exactly real to most people, white or black. He was removed from us. He was at Tuskegee. He was extremely well known. He was a celebrity who was a very humble individual, so he didn't play his celebrity very much at all. He had an odd speaking voice. It was very high, almost a falsetto, which led many people to believe that maybe he had been emasculated at some point, that he had been castrated at some point. And I don't know whether that's true or not. I have heard one recording of him, and it is very odd to listen to him speak. He speaks like a very small child with that kind of vocal range. Very interesting. We have the cover of the program for the 1938 festival shows a picture of him speaking, but there's even a little bit of controversy. The archivist at Tuskegee Institute, when I was speaking with him about this, said he wasn't so sure that Carver made it.
Oh, really?
Carver was very sick in 1938 and canceled appearance after appearance. But I believe that the newspapers would not have said that he was here if indeed he was not here. That's just too easily disproven. That's a hard falsehood to maintain at that time. So I believe he was here. I believe the archivist has at Tuskegee has some good ideas, but maybe they didn't apply. My concern was, where did he stay? Because that's where segregation really does come into, play. Apparently he didn't. It's very possible that he took a morning train down, spoke in the late morning or early afternoon, and then returned to Tuskegee on the train and stayed at home. Did not spend the night down here at all. His speech wasn't real long, maybe about 30 minutes, and it was attended by a large crowd. I don't remember exactly how many people the newspaper said attended, but I remember thinking, that was a pretty good-sized crowd.
You can hear the full conversation with Marty and Greg on the It Came From the Archives podcast on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Austin Toy, and this is TPR Podcast Presents on listener-supported Troy Public Radio.